Do you think there's too many people moving to Hawaii and ever wonder where they're coming from? I'm going to show you a cool resource that I found with data about that coming up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? I often hear people say, hey, there's too many people moving to Hawaii and from California or from some other state. And I always wondered, is that actually true? And I came across this census flow mapping website recently, and I thought it was super interesting. I geeked out on it for a while and was digging into it. But I wanted to show it to you guys and see if there's any truth to that, and also share some information about where people are coming from versus where they're going, because it's not necessarily true that only people come to Hawaii. People also move away from Hawaii too, right? So this interactive map shows you, and what you can do is you can select any county in the entire United States, and then it'll show you the net migration from each county in the United States. And it's a pretty easy color coding scheme down here. So if it's like light or dark orange, that means that there's a net gain. If it's light or dark blue, that means there's a net loss. So more people moved to those areas than to Hawaii. And so if you look in the map, kind of the stuff that we normally think is the case, right? Lots of people from the Western United States moving to Hawaii, but then lots of people moving away. So if we zoom in a little bit and we get down to like the Southern California area, you see the orange colors are the net increase, so the net move away from Hawaii, right? So these areas are areas that people move to, and then the blue areas are where we had a net loss of population to those areas. And so kind of a mixed bag when it comes to California between the orange and blue colors. And then moving up the coastline, same thing, right? All over in these different areas, you have kind of a mixed bag of people coming and going. But definitely some of the darker areas are the ones that are the most interesting, because some of it we kind of know, right? This is Las Vegas, Nevada, right? We always have lots of people moving from Hawaii to Las Vegas. And so obviously we would have a net loss to that area. This is San Diego down here. So we'd have more people moving from Hawaii to San Diego. And then in the Los Angeles area, we have more people moving from there to Hawaii than the other way around. But pretty interesting that you can go all through the United States and look county by county. The Seattle area, we had a net gain. We have lots of people that I know that buy from those areas on the northeast or the northwest because of the weather up there. But a lot of migration to Colorado in and out, which is interesting. This is Salt Lake City, Utah. So we definitely do have a lot of people that move from Hawaii to Utah. I have a lot of friends that have done that. So that makes sense to me that that's a heavy net loss of population to that area. But you can go all the way across the entire United States. As you move across, there is definitely it seems like more net loss counties than there are net gain counties. This is kind of interesting right here, where we had a net gain from Onkey County, South Carolina. No idea where that is, but we had between 78 and 340 people move from that county to Hawaii. So pretty interesting map. And then it gives you a quick summary that kind of summarizes. And I should have mentioned in the beginning, this data set is from 2015 to 2019. So the new data set is not available. It looks like it comes out every 5 years, but you can click on the overall county statistics and see what the movers from or to the state are. And the reality is it's like a net 400 people gain from the mainland US to Hawaii. So over a 5-year period, that's pretty small. And that belief that there's just tons of people flooding into the Big Island from the mainland definitely doesn't have a lot of truth to it. So super interesting map here. I always talk about when people ask, why do people come and why do people leave? And there's a lot of different reasons, but there's definitely a stereotype that I see very commonly, and that is the 55 to 65-year-old that moves to Hawaii, has done well in the mainland, has always had this dream of living on the Big Island, and they sell their property that they have owned for 20 or 30 years on the mainland and that has appreciated well, and then they can buy property here in Hawaii, and then they live here for 10 years, and now you have a 70 to 80-year-old person who is getting up in age. Maybe they're missing their grandkids. They may have some health issues that they need some specialized healthcare resources, and then they end up selling their home and then moving back to the mainland. And we see that very common, definitely in the real estate cycle, where you have that retiree, that young retiree that moves here, and then 10 years later, they end up moving back to the mainland to be closer to family, closer to grandkids, closer to medical care, things like that. So it's interesting where it's not necessarily always locals moving away, or people that are from Hawaii moving away and mainlanders moving in. There's definitely a big cycle of people who come here for a short period of time, maybe a decade, and then move away. And definitely the data shows that there isn't a huge net gain year after year in terms of population on the islands. And a lot of the population that is a net gain are just people having kids, right? And that's how the population increases. So I hope you found this as interesting as I did. But as always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below, or email me at dylan@buybigisland.com. And as always, if you want to book a meeting and talk about anything, your real estate plans, or you have any specific questions that you want to meet face-to-face with, there is a booking link in the description below, and you can do that, and I'd be happy to talk to you guys. I'll see you guys next week. Aloha.